Now, Washington's final years in retirement were not happy ones. The American political world was changing, and Washington struggled to comprehend it. During his final years in office, he and his administration became subjected to vicious partisan criticism, and he felt that criticism deeply. Indeed, Jefferson thought that Washington took such public attacks to heart more than any man I've ever met with. Washington watched with dismay what he believed was the growing interference of the French government in American politics. For him, the Jeffersonian Republican Party had become the French Party. That's the term he used to describe the Jeffersonians, a kind of fifth column, to use that World War II term to describe how these Federalists viewed the Jeffersonian Republicans. The Jeffersonian Republican Party was, he said, the curse of this country, threatening the stability and independence of the United States. He saw plots and enemies everywhere, and he became as much of a high-tone Federalist as Hamilton. Now, his fears were real. His sense of crisis was deep. He and many other Federalists, which was the name, of course, the supporters of the administration called themselves, thought that the French might invade the country and together with the French party overthrow the government. It was not, they didn't invade, as we know, but it was not easy to know that. The French, after all, under Napoleon, were invading countries all over Europe and creating puppet governments. Bavarian Republic in Holland and a number of puppet governments in Italy. So they feared that that was what the French might do, and with this support of the fifth column, the Republican Party. Having struggled for 8 or 9 years against the invasion of our rights by one power, England, and to establish an independence of it, Washington wrote in 1798, I would not remain an unconcerned spectator of the attempts of another power, France, to accomplish the same object, though in a different way with less pretensions, indeed without any pretensions at all. He thus listened attentively to all the urgent Federalist calls that he come out of retirement and head the army that the Congress had created, an army of 50,000 men on paper, to meet this French invasion. Though he again expressed reluctance and asked whether becoming commander-in-chief once again would not be considered a restless act, evidence of my discontent in retirement, he was far more eager in 1798 to step back into the breach and to do his duty than he had ever been before. It was a measure, I think, of his fears and of his despair with what he called this age of wonder. Before he could actually commit himself, Adams asked him, would you become commander-in-chief? He hadn't answered him before Adams went ahead and appointed him commander-in-chief and as leader of all the military forces of the United States. Washington accepted, but he scarcely comprehended how it had all come about. The next thing he knew, he was on his way to Philadelphia to organize the army. Events were outrunning his ability to control them or even to comprehend them. And he more and more saw himself caught up, as he said, in the designs of Providence. His command was a disaster. He wrangled over the appointment of the second in command, intrigued against the president, and interfered with his cabinet. When neither the French invasion nor the American army materialized, Washington crept back to Mount Vernon, thoroughly disillusioned with the ways of American politics. In July 1799, 6 months before his death, an unanticipated death, of course. He could have been saved by modern medicine. He was only 67. But in July of 1799, Governor Jonathan Trumbull of Connecticut, with the backing of many Federalists, other Federalists, urged Washington once again to stand for the presidency in 1800. Only Washington, Trumbull said, could unite the Federalists and save the country from a French president, that is, Jefferson. Finally, Washington had had enough. In his reply to Trumbull, he no longer bothered with references to his reputation for disinterestedness and his desire to play the role of Cincinnatus. Instead, he talked about the new political conditions that made his candidacy irrelevant. In this new democratic era of party politics, he said, personal influence, distinctions of character, they no longer mattered. If the members of the Republican Party set up a broomstick as a candidate and called it a true son of liberty or a Democrat or any other epithet that will suit their purposes, it would still command their votes in toto. But even worse, he said, the same was true of the Federalists. Party spirit now ruled all, and people voted only for their party candidate. Even if he were the Federalist candidate, Washington was thoroughly convinced I should not draw a single vote from the anti-federal side. Therefore, his standing for election made no sense. He would stand upon no stronger ground than any other federal candidate, well supported. Now, he wrote all this, I think, in anger and in despair. And although he exaggerated, I think he was essentially right. The political world was changing, becoming democratic, and parties, not great men, would soon become the objects of contention. Now, to be sure, we Americans have continued to long for great heroes as leaders, especially military heroes. And right up through Eisenhower, we have periodically elected Washington's Monkey or would-be Washingtons to the presidency. But democracy made such great heroes no longer essential to the workings of America's government. And Washington, more than any other individual, was the man who made that democracy possible. As Jefferson admitted, the moderation and virtue of a single character probably prevented this revolution from becoming closed, as most others have been, by a subversion of that liberty it was intended to establish. Washington was an extraordinary man who made it possible for ordinary men to rule. There's been no president quite like him, and we can be sure that we'll not see his like again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.